Hey, how's it going out there, folks? Welcome back here to a Tuesday afternoon, just about 4 p.m. here, California time. August 13th, 2024. It is the Earthmaster out here. I want to cover a little bit more in detail about this fault system that this recent earthquake activity has occurred on here in Southern California. More specifically, the 4.4 that struck in Los Angeles, or south of Pasadena here recently, yesterday in fact. That fault system here has seen an increase in earthquake activity here recently, and there is some concern of potentially seeing a larger quake out here on this fault system. Now, this is on the Puente Hills fault, as noted here by Dr. Lucy Jones. She is the seismologist and the face of the USGS and other news media outlets when it comes to earthquake information there in Southern California. So we're looking at the Puente Hills thrust fault, which is a blind thrust fault, meaning that it does not reach up to the surface. There is a position of that thrust fault right there. And unfortunately, this fault system has a potential to produce a 7.5 magnitude earthquake, which would roughly be the same damage done as an 8-pointer would be on the distant San Andreas fault. So even though it's an 8-pointer over there on the San Andreas fault, a 7.5 in close proximity and directly underneath Los Angeles would be just as powerful in that location. So we got a little bit of concern here. The 6.0 magnitude Whittier Narrows earthquake back in 1987 was what led to the discovery of this fault system. So it's been building up for a little while, and there's been various earthquakes on here. I want to show you guys real quick. This is the last 7 days. Of course, we've had that 4.4 and a handful of smaller quakes following that earthquake as well. Historically, in this area, there's our most recent activity. Of course, the Puente Hills is somewhat lengthy underneath this area, and there's been a handful of quakes out here across the greater Los Angeles area. There's a 3.4 that struck back in June, same location, and I think there was another, let me zoom in here, directly to this area. It's not only confined to this region, but this is where we've been seeing a little bit of earthquake activity, and in general, the Puente Hills fault extends further down towards the Los Angeles area, East LA region, and westward. So there's a little concern here that this is building up some steam and could be ready to produce a 7.5 earthquake. And directly underneath a populated area here, you get this result called liquefaction here. And this is a little scary because it's a phenomenon here that causes the earth to move like jello when shaken. So when it occurs beneath vulnerable buildings and other structures, the results there can be catastrophic. So more intense shaking there due to the liquefaction process that would be involved around the Los Angeles area. Let me go back over this other article. I'll include all of these links here that I'm covering in the update video here, so you guys can check it out. There's a Puente Hills thrust fault. It segments across Los Angeles in various areas here. And again, they're calling this LA's biggest monster. And it was recently discovered. Just recently discovered. Let's see. Is that the one I was looking at? Hold on a second here. There's a couple different interesting articles on it here. Maybe it was back on this one. A couple different ones here. Earthquakes can occur roughly every 3,000 years on this fault system here. Now, the slip rate is slower than the San Andreas fault, so that's why it takes so long for strain to build up here. And it looks as though geologists have determined that the fault here has ruptured at least 4 times in the past 11,000 years. And the magnitudes of such earthquakes there on the Puente Hills thrust fault have been around 7.2 to 7.5. So we have not seen anything near that on this fault system there that runs directly underneath Los Angeles. And here's an estimated shake scenario here. Let me zoom this up here so you guys can see. This would be quite intense in terms of, back out here just a little bit, in terms of the intensity underneath Los Angeles. This would be in almost the extreme category. So very heavy potential damage here, violent. And of course, as you can see, that damage goes around the area as well. But one thing I can't find here is when the last one took place. As far as the last major rupture out here, they just state that it's been 4 ruptures here in the last 11,000 years. So yeah, you roughly divide that 3, 6, 9, 12. We could be getting close here to seeing something that's been building up, and all these little earthquakes here that have been popping up here recently could be a key leading indicator here of increasing strain out in the region. So let's see here. There's some slip rates upwards around 0.18 to 0.20 inches per year, which is fairly minimal. Looks like it's about 40 kilometers across the northern Los Angeles basin area. And of course it's dipping, so it's that thrust fault here that's a little concerning. A blind thrust fault. This fault was responsible for one moderate earthquake back in 1987, right? That was a 5.9, and that's how they discovered the Puente Hills thrust fault there from this surprise earthquake. And that's not the full magnitude that can take place out there on that. Again, estimated between 7.2 and 7.5 here. Let me see here. I'm wondering if I got off the site here real quick. Let me see. Okay, so looks like back in 2017, which has obviously been almost 10 years now, a team of scientists there from Harvard produced a report that shows accelerating slip rates along this fault, so increasing as time goes by. This increase in rate implies that the magnitudes and or the frequency of earthquakes on this fault segment have increased over time. So, this is obviously like any other fault out there across California. It can happen at any time, but this one more specifically dangerous because of the location here underneath a highly populated area. And that 7.5 would probably set these guys back quite a few years here. And that's where we've been seeing the earthquake activity here recently, folks, on that on the Puente Hills fault, thrust fault. That's why I say it's pretty important to pay attention to these little events that come and go, because this could all be foreshock activity. We could have a big one tonight or in the next couple of years, and they would look back at these events and call them all foreshocks. So it's very dynamic. When there's regional stress across Southern California, it's good to pay close attention. Obviously, this fault system here, the blind thrust fault, is completely separate and different from the activity up here around Bakersfield, where we've seen that 5.2. But the overall stress and strain out here is related to the plate boundary, right? That's where all the strain builds up here. And obviously, we see earthquakes on any given day out here across the San Jacinto fault zone. But these little, I can't really say little, but areas of concern that are showing seismically increasing activity here recently in various locations here is telling me that things are really pressurizing out here against the plate boundary. And of course, this most recent one here on the Pacific side of the plate boundary, the general plate dynamics out here, folks, work as this. We got the North American plate here in the brown, pointing down towards the southeast here in this general direction. The Pacific plate here in the yellow color, moving off to the northwest. So all that strain builds up right here as the two plates slide past each other. And this area is definitely of concern because of those thrust faults that exist out here. There's also the Malibu thrust fault out here. It's pretty lengthy. A couple different troughs offshore as well. So strain builds up quite a bit out here. Los Angeles sits in the middle or just on top of one of the blind thrust faults here that can produce a 7.2 to 7.5 earthquake. So a little on the concerning side. They're estimating the economic loss here would be as high as $252 billion. Not to mention the potential fatalities and whatnot. 735,000 people could lose their homes. And yeah, it's all somewhat scary, right? And a little bit of doom and gloom, but you have to be aware of what's going on. This article here was put out 2020, but there's been various articles in regards to the Puente Hills thrust fault. And the frequency of a major rupture in the Puente Hills fault is on the order of once per several thousand years. I read 3,000. This frequency of occurrence is relatively low compared to the San Andreas fault, which of course builds up more steam due to the location there on the plate boundary. But really, what's really scary is there's no mention of when the last one was. Just 4 ruptures in the last 11,000 years. So, and with increasing slip rate here, that could increase the occurrence level for a big quake on this area. But yeah, I couldn't find anything. I looked up a lot of articles here, last major rupture on the Puente Hills fault, and can't really find it. San Andreas fault, 1857, that's on the Mojave segment, but this isn't anywhere near the Los Angeles area. We're talking about just specifically this dangerous fault system here, the blind thrust fault, the Puente Hills thrust fault. And it's just good to be on guard, folks. I have a lot of viewers down there, so I want everyone to be safe and have an earthquake plan. But the inevitable will happen, right? And these little events here are just a key indicator of it continuing to build up quite a bit of strain here. And let's see here. Even even here, Dr. Lucy Jones, she put out a couple articles here and even some news articles throwing out that California is going to see some higher earthquake rates, higher seismicity rates here in Southern California, just due to the quietness we've seen here in the past 2 decades. But it's picking up, right? Definitely picking up. And now's the time to be prepared, because that's when things could really take place out here. I don't see it on here, but I read earlier someone asked a question about, don't these little quakes relieve the stress from the big ones happening? No, it doesn't. Not in the sequence of activity that's going on here. And I don't think so on these type of thrust faults that sit out here in Southern California. If you're on a little the creeping segment of the San Andreas fault, yeah, you got all these little earthquakes that kick up from time to time and prevents a lot of strain from building up. But this area and these, I don't think so. I'll have to see if I can find that and post it up there. But somebody had asked a question about it, and she mentioned there that that's not the case here, that these little quakes don't relieve the strain. So if you happen to know, or you have someone or some information on that, when the last one was on the Puente Hills fault, there's hundreds of fault systems out there in Southern California, but we're more concerned about this thrust fault where we're seeing this recent earthquake activity take place here. Got about 19 earthquakes. There was a couple quakes prior to that, prior to the 4.4, and then there was even a 3-pointer out there in the same area back in June of this year, and that 5-pointer back in 1987. So things are coming, and it seems like things are increasing out here day by day for California. And look at the Bakersfield area. They're still seeing a lot of earthquake activity out here. In the last, let's see, has it been a week? I think it's been just about a week now. Yeah, since the 5.2. Look how many earthquakes they've had. How many aftershocks? Almost 600. Almost 600 earthquakes here in the last week. So that's a lot. There's still a lot of strain building up out here from a 5.2. And there's still a little uncertainty on which fault system this occurred on. But it's an overall strain here of it's an overall picture of strain being pushed up here into this area along the plate boundary. Ridgecrest has been jumping in on that as well. And of course, what sits down here is the plate boundary, the San Andreas Fault. That's the southern segment here is going to produce an 8.1 one day, and that's been over 300 years. So a lot is going on out here. Many different swarming areas, many faults out here showing an increase in earthquake activity as a whole, not just in one separate area, but as a whole across this area of the plate boundary. Northern California has been pretty quiet up here. It seems as though everything's stuck and focused down here along this area for now. But best thing to do, guys, is just be prepared. I put a little information out here for for folks to know about, because a lot of people are aware of earthquakes, but maybe not aware of the potential for large earthquakes. I remember when I was up in Oregon here a couple years back, southern Oregon, I was doing a little study about whether the towns up there have tsunami signs and evacuation routes properly positioned across various areas. And where I was staying at the motel, I asked this lady if they were familiar with the Cascadia subduction zone, and the potential for the big earthquake activity, and they had no clue. They just assumed that the San Andreas Fault down in Southern California was the one that could produce a big earthquake, and that's right, but Oregon is a long ways away from Southern California, right? San Andreas Fault stops right here. But you got the Cascadia megathrust area, and that one's going to produce a 9-pointer or greater one day, and that's been over 320-something years now, 324. So expect, I definitely think we're going to see increasing earthquake activity out here, and the risk and potential for some bigger ones in the days, hours, and months ahead. For now, though, just some aftershock activity, but who's to say that this is not all foreshock activity, right? Tomorrow, big one down here, all this would be foreshock activity, including that 4-pointer. Yeah, see, 4 times in the last 11,000 years. So let me get a specific on that. So that's every 2,750 years. But at the rate, the slip rate looks like it's increasing according to a recent article. So that could drop that occurrence, as far as 2,000 every 2,700 and something years. But no mention of when the last one was. The last full rupture, goodness. Kind of curious, see if anybody has any information on that. And of course, that magnitude would be about 15 times stronger than the 1994 Northridge earthquake. I remember that very well. That was pretty crazy. It wasn't down there, but I remember watching that on the news. All right, so let's see here. Like I say, I can't find anything up here on the last rupture. There's the Puente Hills thrust fault right there. There's all the directional stress and strain. There's the Puente Hills thrust fault. Various sections right here that go directly underneath Los Angeles. There's a 1987 earthquake. A lot of information out here. Definitely more than enough to keep me busy all day. I've been looking at this and just thinking about all the increasing earthquake activity out here recently. And nothing up in Northern California, but more so down in Southern Cal. Seems like about the Garlock Fault shear zone, which is this area right here. And then down south here. San Andreas Fault, quiet for now. But who knows what was taking place prior to the last big one down here. Over 300 years ago, the southern segment here. All right, so we'll continue to watch it, folks, and report back on anything that changes. Worldwide activity right now, not a whole lot going on worldwide. Yellowstone National Park up here. A couple smaller earthquakes being reported. Let's go check this out. Oops. I need to add it back on here. See what we got. Nothing big, just a couple very small. Those are very small earthquakes showing up over here across Maple Creek. A couple of these very small ones, but nothing big going on. That's one thing we haven't had in a while, is a big old earthquake swarm up there at Yellowstone National Park. Everything's going down. The inflation's, as far as GPS stations go, it's going down. There's not an increase in earthquake activity. The steam explosion a month back here is due to a lot of the groundwater interacting with the heated areas below, but that's not an increase in volcanic activity. It just happens. You get enough time built up there, and you get these steam pockets that kind of like eggs. If you cook them, well, I've cooked them in the microwave before, so they actually come out pretty good. But you got to watch out for these little pockets of steam in there because they just pop if you go to take it off the plate, and you wouldn't know about it, but it's in there. So somewhat, I guess that's a similar comparison, but yeah, pretty quiet out there for now. Rest of the globe out here, as you can see, earthquake activity across the plate boundary. Hawaii's been having a little bit of swarming going on here across the Kilauea volcano, leading off to the upper east or lower east rift zone here. It's starting to stretch down here, so watching that pretty closely. Also, Iceland here has been having quite a bit of earthquake activity up around the Svartsengi area and the Reykjanes Peninsula here. Got a little swarm going on here across this area south. Over the last 24 hours, though, it's been quite heightened out here. Let me show you guys the last 24 hours of all magnitudes, and, quite a bit going on out here. Nothing big. I don't think we're going to look at any eruption yet here across the Svartsengi area, where we've seen, numerous eruptions here take place here recently. Northeast of Grindavik, east of the Blue Lagoon and the Svartsengi power plant, roughly in the craters area here. But, more notably, the earthquakes have been in a sequence south here of our area of interest here recently. So got to watch that as well. We could see maybe some migration take place here around or in the Grindavik area in worst case scenario. So we'll continue to watch that, folks, and report back on it if anything changes. A couple more aftershocks coming into Southern California, roughly about the same time of each other here. Kind of bouncing back and forth here. You see that 1.1, and then roughly about a minute later we got one down here. So there's still quite a bit of strain happening out here, folks, and I guarantee you a 4.4 hasn't released the full potential that's been building up out here for no telling how many hundreds or thousands of years. Again, if you get some info on this, I can't find it when the last one was. Let me know on the Puente Hills thrust fault. Closest thing I can find is 4 ruptures in the last 11,000 years. When was the last one, though? That's a good question. We'll catch you guys back out here a little bit later on this evening, folks. Stay safe, and we'll continue to keep an eye on things out here.